All right, we're here at the Golden Com podcast. I got a special guest with me, Dr. Gustavo.
Great to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So we got a chance to catch up before the podcast, and you are a culture expert.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of experience in that area.
You make your living talking about culture.
That's right. Talking about it in presentations, keynotes, but also working with companies directly and how to change their culture.
Okay, which I love culture. Right, I've watched your videos, and we know a lot of the same people.
Fantastic.
And I know that culture as a product is an outcome of several activities. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really interested in starting with you, getting to know you better. For starters, you're from not this country.
Right. I am from Argentina. I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and my parents brought me to the United States when I was 3 years old, and I should say me and my brother. I'm a twin. I have a twin brother. They brought us when we were 3 years old, and we had nothing to do with it. It wasn't a choice we made. It just happened to be a benefit that we received from my parents making that shift, leaving the only culture they ever knew to come to a different culture, different language they didn't speak at the time in order to improve the arc of our family's history.
Okay, that's why I want to start here. So you said you were 3.
I was 3 years old.
So by no choice, first of all, by no choice, by none of our choices, we're born where we're born.
That's exactly right.
So there's a circumstance there that none of us have any control of. And then you, again, at 3, by no choice, you get moved to where you move.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Your parents, were they, I'm naive on this, and I don't know the years, and my Argentina history is probably weak at best. Mm-hmm. Were they escaping, like economic escaping, social escaping?
Yeah, so my parents left in 1970, which was right before the Argentine junta, the military government, came in. So they happened to leave because of economic reasons. My father in Argentina was an anesthesiologist. My mother was a midwife, but they couldn't get work. And there was already the beginnings of political unrest going on. For example, I have a cousin who was thrown into jail for a year. Everyone thought he was dead. Nobody knew where he was. And at the end of that year, somebody came into his cell and said, "You have 24 hours to leave the country or you'll never be seen again." That was part of the political unrest, and he left Argentina, ended up going to Sweden. That was a cousin of mine. That was going on in addition to the economic constraints, challenges that my parents had. They said, we're going to try and make it somewhere else, and they chose to come to the United States.
So, don't cry for me, Argentina. What does that mean to you when you hear that?
So that for me is a historical reference to Evita Perón, who was the wife of Juan Perón, who was one of the presidents of Argentina in the 40s and 50s. Perón was somebody who, depending on which side of the political spectrum you fall on, he's somebody who either saved Argentina or, let's say, changed the course of its political economic path, and I tend to fall on the latter part of the spectrum. Peronism created a sense of what government should be providing for you without necessarily the productivity goals, metrics, and things that we talk about, here in the United States.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to double click on that on a second podcast because so let's get you to New York, or where did you go to school?
Yeah, exactly. So, I grew up in a school district on Long Island called Half Hollow Hills, kind of Dix Hills area. I lived in East Northport, was part of the district. I went to undergraduate at the University of Rochester, which is in Western New York. I went to graduate school at Hofstra University, which is in Hempstead, New York, back on Long Island. And then my career path took me to a postdoc in New York City, a forensic postdoc. So I worked in the prison system for 4 years. I tell people I spent 4 years in prison, working as a psychologist. And then I did 4 years traditional mental health. I ran an outpatient mental health center. And from the year 2000 on, I pivoted into business, and I haven't looked back.
Okay. And that's where you are now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, and then I can see why culture is interesting to you.
Yeah, for me, culture is what, and really because of my background, because I experienced a variety of different cultures growing up. I grew up what I consider bicultural because in my household we spoke Spanish. We had lots of Latino traditions, yet outside of my household, it was very, again, grew up here in the United States, so what I would call very New York type culture or subculture. So for me, it was about blending the two. I understood that you can behave certain ways in one area, certain ways in another. That spoke to how we adapt to the culture we find ourselves in. And in business, the environment that we create for our people, our employees, is all about culture. The environment that we create for anyone who works with us is our culture. And for definition, just so we know specifically, because culture, people think culture is an amorphous thing.
Yeah, good. So what is culture?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So,
in a business environment,
Yeah,
not country, but business.
Right. So
Okay.
I would say the parameters change whether you're talking about national, regional, or business. The definition doesn't. So culture is beliefs, behavior rules, traditions, and rituals. So those are the components of culture. Beliefs are how we see the world. When we change the way we see the world we see changes. People often ask, well, what about values? You didn't say values. Aren't values part of our culture? Well, values are a type of belief. Values are those beliefs we hold near and dear. Values are those beliefs we prioritize over others. So beliefs, behavior rules, which are the rules that govern our behavior. How am I supposed to behave? For example, I'm sure you behave differently in this podcast than you do at a rock concert than you do in a sports arena. Okay? Same person, different environment, different cultures, different contexts. Changes your behavior. And traditions and rituals are simply things we do repeatedly. So whether we're talking national, regional, or business, that's the definition. Beliefs, behavior rules, traditions, and rituals.
Fantastic. So I do talk to a lot of CEOs, just because my business, I have a lot of clients and we work with their CEOs because we do things that the CEO is usually very interested in because it's their website. We do a lot of websites.
Fantastic.
So a lot of times I ask CEOs, what's the most important thing for you here at this company? And not every time, but almost every time, they say, the most important thing to me is culture.
I love
That's what
that
they
response.
say.
You're dealing with very smart CEOs.
Well, that's what they say.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, that's really interesting. And then I said, well, what do you do for culture? And a lot of times that stumps them.
Right, exactly. Blank stare.
Deer
in headlights.
Well, you just told me it was the most important thing. I mean, you do training in all these other areas. So can you learn? Can culture be taught? How's that? Can you, as a executive in a company, let's say you have a company, you're in charge of it, and you think culture is important, just like a sports team, company, sports team, a band, culture is important. I would imagine you would want the best culture that you could find. How does somebody teach it?
I agree absolutely what you're saying. In any position of leadership, whether it's a coach on a sports team, a CEO, or even leaders that aren't the CEO, part of the executive team, I would say that culture is their number one responsibility because, again, it creates the context which changes behavior. So can it be taught? Absolutely. Here's the challenge, that a lot of CEOs or other executives, they believe that their culture is a reflection of their personality. And often that is referred to as a culture of personality.
Wait a minute. Help me, though.
Yeah, sure.
A culture is a reflection of whose personality?
The leader's personality.
Okay, so the leader's personality.
So
okay.
they build a culture based on what their personality is.
Got you.
That's a culture of personality.
Okay.
And I will say to those CEOs, if culture is important to you, we can build a culture that is a reflection of your personality, or we can build a culture that ensures the longevity of the company. Pick one, because they're usually mutually exclusive, and I'm always pushing for the longevity of the company.
I want B.
Yeah, but in order, and therein lies the rub, because wanting B means, as a leader, you get this choice. You can build a culture that is of your personality or longevity, but to build a culture of longevity, that means you have to behave in ways that are outside of your comfort zone, that are outside of your tendencies, because personality is just a tendency. So we need to have, as leaders, enough self-awareness to say, okay, this is a part of my personality that won't assist in the longevity of the company, which means I need to change my behavior, whether it's comfortable for me or not.
Okay. Gustavo, can I call you
Yeah,
Gustavo?
please, by all means.
Okay. So this is very interesting to me. So let me throw a couple quadrants out for you.
Please.
So there's a DISC assessment. So I've got my 4 quadrants, DI, SC. Okay, there's this Myers-Briggs tool.
MBTI, that's right.
I'm an ENTJ, so I know these things. There's these indexes, or I started with what color is your parachute. So I have all these assessments. I have all these assessments that tell me who I am, whether it's my personality or my work behavior, my default positions. And so what you're telling me, if I can rewind back to, that chances are, unless I've intentfully done something, that the culture is at risk of being just an extension of me, my quadrants, my default behaviors.
If you allow it to, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And let me add another piece of this, because you brought up a couple of, a lot of people in the business arena, they think personality is destiny. Assessment. Now, I'm a psychologist. I love assessment. I want you to know what you're getting when it comes to hiring and promotion. I want you to know what you're getting. Here's the key issue, is that people believe that personality is destiny, which means we hire based on personality, and environment, context, or culture is a better controller of behavior. Even Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, says you fall in a range, right? So let's talk about that a little bit, because part of what we do is professional speaking, right? That's something we both do. A lot of people believe that in order to be a professional speaker, you need to be an extrovert, because we go to lunches, dinners, etc. We meet lots of people. Some of my closest friends in this industry are powerful introverts. So if you go back to Myers-Briggs, the first dyad of the Myers-Briggs is introversion versus extroversion. You know this for everyone else. The way it's scored is you can score a 30 on the introversion scale or the extroversion scale. A 0 is considered a center score. Some of my closest friends and best speakers in this industry score a 30 on the introversion scale. In psychometrics, that's called a ceiling effect. It means they might be more introverted, but the instrument can't measure it. Yet, you put them in the context of smart executives who want to learn, they behave like an extrovert. That is because they want to. There's an old joke. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Well, it takes only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. Okay, you can't change people against their will. We create a context or a culture that they want to belong to, and then they will behave in ways that are outside their personality. That's the power of culture.
Awesome. Okay. So I find culture not only to be interesting, but very complex, right? It's just a complex animal because, so let's talk about maybe some contemporary situations we have. This hybrid workspace.
Great.
You can't not talk about it.
Absolutely.
It's still going. We had this thing called the pandemic. This thing is over, but the outcome of this pandemic is particularly in the white collar, in the blue collar, there's not a lot of wiggle room in the factory. You're coming in.
We could talk more about that, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in the office environment, there's this incredible wrestling still.
That's exactly right.
On how do we acquire the best talent? Where does the best talent want to be every day? Well, I'm setting it up. Do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah. What do we talk about here?
So let me say, the hybrid workforce is a shift in our culture that's resulted because of an event called the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, 77% of the workforce was working what's called co-located in the same location, 9 to 5. That is a constraint on location because they had to be at work, and a constraint on time because it was 9 to 5. 77% pre-pandemic. Now, to your point, this is not played out. This is not settled out. Companies are still trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we recruit, engage, and retain the best talent, leveraging our culture, which is part of it, is that hybrid piece. And I'm sure you've heard, there are CEOs who will say, well, if you can be at a restaurant, you can be at work, and I want you at work, 40 hours a week, et cetera. To those CEOs, I say, congratulations, you're going to realize some huge salary savings because you're going to lose 10 to 20% of your workforce. Here is what we know. Whether people are in, and we'll stick with the office environment, the information-based employees versus manufacturing. Doesn't matter where you are on that scale, every human being wants agency. Agency is about the ability to make decisions that have impact on our lives, the ability to make decisions that help us perform better. That's agency. Every executive in the country has it, every human being wants it. So the way we give them that is flexibility in their work schedule. Now, that is for whether you are, to use your term, white collar or blue collar, whether you are in an information environment or in a manufacturing environment. Everybody wants greater flexibility in your work schedule, and we can talk about that. But first, let me come back to location, because to your point, if you're working at a multi-million-dollar machine in manufacturing, you can't take the machine home with you. If you're working in a construction site, you can't take the construction site home with you. A hospital can't take patients home with you. So there are industries that are naturally constrained on location. Those are the ones that we need to add flexibility to even more. But let's talk about those not constrained on location, meaning hybrid. So companies right now are moving towards a structured hybrid, which is typically 2 to 3 days a week. Must be in the office. I want to talk about a company that's doing something different. Smucker's a jelly. If it's Smucker's, it's got to be good, right?
Smucker's the Today Show Smucker's?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Today Show, jelly, preserves, etc.
Right.
They're based in Orville, Ohio. Smucker's has taken a different approach. They have 22 core weeks. 22 core weeks means it is during those 22 core weeks that they encourage you to be at the office, and here is how they encourage you. They create organizational, team-based metrics that can only be achieved through in-person collaboration. So if you're going to succeed at Smucker's, and those are weeks where we're going to be focused on these specific goals, which are organizational and team-based, then you're only going to be able to succeed if you are at the office during those 22 core weeks. And it's typically 3 to 4 days during those core weeks. And here's the issue, or here's what's happened. Some people moved away. The agreement is if you move, you can move away, but if you're going to come back to the office, it's on your dime. Meaning you can move away, and it's going to cost you to come back. You can live in a different part of the country, but it's going to cost you. Now, some people have kept apartments in Orville, not an expensive place to live. Some people kept apartments. Some people have family, so they'll stay in their apartments or family. Some will rent hotels. But the issue is, to be successful, we must create a culture or a context that people want to belong to and want to succeed. This goes back to, I sometimes use this metaphor in presentations, and you may be familiar with it, the Aesop's fable, the story of the sun and the wind. You remember? So for viewers who may not remember, the sun and the wind are having an argument. They're watching a guy walk across the street. He's got a coat on. They're arguing over who can make the guy take his coat off. So the wind goes first. The wind blows and blows and blows and blows. Clouds move in. Temperature goes down. And what does the guy do? He cinches his coat. The wind can't blow it off because he's holding it tighter. So then it's the sun's turn. The wind dies down. Sun starts to shine. Clouds clear. Temperature goes higher, higher, higher. What does the guy do? He takes off his coat voluntarily. So I tell that story because what I tell CEOs is, be the sun, not the wind. Don't try and force your people to come in. Create an environment where they will come in voluntarily. We do that by creating metrics of success that require in-person collaboration. Then your people will want to come in, and then you'll succeed.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it just seems so simple now that you've explained it.
It's conceptually, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like everything else. It's the execution.
Yeah.
It's how do you do it? Conceptually, I'm glad. Conceptually, I want it to be easy to get it, but then it's all right. Now let's dig in. Let's figure out how do we do it.
Yeah. So for me to rewind what I heard, at a place like Smucker's, which is an example, a case study of yours, it sounds like, there's 52 weeks in a year. 22 of them are going to be heavy in person.
That's right.
So if I want to live in Fort Lauderdale, I could probably not come into the office 30 weeks a year and do my work from home.
That is exactly.
But there are 22 weeks that I know that I have to tell my wife, hey, so you know, I'm going to be on a business trip 22 weeks for 4 days, just like I work as a traveling business. The only difference is because we've chosen to live in Fort Lauderdale, my company doesn't pay for the business trip, But don't worry, Smucker's is in a place where the hotels aren't very much, and I'll get my plane flights all straight away.
That is exactly correct. And some of the benefits is they're people that they have been able to move away, but they've also been able to recruit from other parts of the country.
Oh, of course.
So they're
Yeah.
recruiting, their employee pool is now national as opposed to just Ohio, because they're based in Orville, Ohio.
That's a great story. Jeez, well, I want more stories like that. Like, we'll have to have you back for some of them.
It's a great example.
Yeah, that's a great example. Maybe before I let you go, because I want to make sure I get this question in. Now we have this new, we have a new type of person that's entering the workforce where the pandemic interrupted their college experience.
That's exactly right.
And I noticed something that's interesting with people who are young graduates. Let's say right now they're 22 through 26, and they had an interruption during either high school or college with it.
Yeah.
What's driving those people?
Great question.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're really talking about, when you're talking, let's say people between 15, 16, and 26, those are cusps of two generations. So the cutoff is around 2001. So we're talking about the end of millennials, millennial generation, and the beginning of Gen Zs, what they're currently called. So millennials grew up during a period of prosperity. They are highly entrepreneurial. They like starting businesses. They start businesses with their friends, et cetera. They grew up during prosperity, which makes them very willing to take risk. Gen Zs grew up during a period of the Great Recession. They are the children of the Great Recession, which means they either saw their parents or parents of their friends lose houses, jobs, cars, etc. So one of the key distinctions is Gen Zs from their employer are looking specifically for stability and security. These are key distinctions between millennials and Gen Zs. Gen Zs are risk averse. Millennials are willing to take risk. Gen Zs are risk averse. So they will come in an interview and say, how did your company manage the downturn in the pandemic?
That's what they're looking for.
Did you lay off people, or are they still with you? The best of all answers is we didn't lose anybody and we've added since. But if you can't tell that narrative, you really need to have an answer as to because they'll ask, where are the people that you laid off? Where are they now? Did they come back? Did they go elsewhere? How many people have you hired? They're asking because, again, for them it's about stability and security. So how does your company, how did they manage that in particular? And they'll ask about others as well.
That's great. So, okay, well, you've been so nice to spend your time with me here.
Absolute pleasure.
I know you don't
Great
live
questions.
here, and the fact that you've come in here is a favor to me. I appreciate that. So I just have to ask you, how do companies work with you? Is it?
Thank you. No, I appreciate.
Is that a fair question?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
So for us, there are lots of ways to contact us. I mean, the best way is to reach out on our website, drgustavo.com, drgustavo.com. And often we will start with some type of presentation, whether it's a keynote, which is a 2-hour, half-day, full day. We also do kind of consulting based on scope, what they need. But the biggest program we have is an 8-week program called Culture Catalyst. And a catalyst is something that you can put into a chemical reaction to initiate, accelerate it, then you can pull it out, and the reaction continues. So our idea is it's a program that in 8 weeks, and it's delivered virtually, so there's no cost of travel. In 8 weeks, we help companies either establish or refine and define their culture in a way that creates a foundation for them to continue to grow it.
That's great. So we'll put that in the show notes.
Fantastic.
Fair enough. Okay.
Love it.
Dr.
Thank you so
Scott,
much.
Hey, thanks for coming. Appreciate
pleasure.
it. See you again. All right.
Great.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.